We are in a change. We are going to
Yes, we
go to
are.
Stone Temple Pilots Core, their first album.
STP.
Another band we're going to be covering multiple albums from in this decade, so we figure we might as well start at the top. Where did
Okay.
this one fall in the rankings, Matt?
So Core falls in at number 148 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 12 in 1992, number 807 of all time. It is Stone Temple Pilots' second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums behind 1994's Purple. The Core did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Stone Temple Pilots ranked number 317 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And I guess I go first on this one.
You do.
I have to start off by saying my first memory of Stone Temple Pilots. I was in my bedroom with the MTV on, and the video for Plush came on, and
Mhm.
I am one of those people that was confused for about 2 minutes because
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought
You and everyone.
I was like, okay, why is Eddie Vedder like I didn't know they had another song. Why is his hair red? Like I totally thought it was Pearl Jam.
My
I mean,
first
it's
thing was
just
very similar. I was at a
yeah,
tennis camp at the time, and the song came on at like a evening, social thing they had us with,
yeah,
and I listened to it, and I said, "That's a pretty good Pearl Jam song,"
yeah.
and no one knew it wasn't. And then like I turned on the radio later, and they're like, "That's the new song by Stone Temple Pilots." I was like, "What?
What the
Stone Temple
hell?
Pilots?" Yeah, and then I saw the video, same thing. I'm like, "This doesn't make sense."
Yeah, because that's what my brain was. My ears were hearing Eddie Vedder, and my eyes were like, that's clearly not Eddie Vedder. So what the
Well,
hell?
and then you're
Um,
expecting the rest of their stuff to sound like Pearl Jam, and really nothing else they ever do sounds that much like Pearl
Yeah,
Jam.
I
Yeah.
mean that's definitely the song that's probably got the Eddie Vedder
Hmm.
Jarl on it more
Yes.
so than any other one. So yeah, so I think because of that, because they came a little bit later. Obviously, Pearl Jam and Nirvana were out, as were Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Stone Temple Pilots always to me was kind of like that, that fifth wheel of grunge, right? They're clearly a grunge band. But I don't know. In my mind, I did like Stone Temple Pilots, and I got their first three records. I had this and the other two that came after it, and I liked them plenty. But I always, in my mind, was kind of thinking of them as like, they're definitely a tier behind some of these other bands, and that's just kind of a narrative that just stuck with me. Sometimes that those things happen. That it's just like that's your initial impression, and it doesn't ever really leave you. Um, and I don't know. I'm gonna be it's gonna be interesting for me to kind of go into not just the Stone Temple Pilots records, but also the other ones for those other bands. We started doing that already. This is a really good album. This stands up there with some of these other ones that we're talking about for my money. I think that this is just a really solid album from start to finish. I forgot how many good songs that they have. It's one I think that they, even though they probably rank high of overall grunge bands, I think they consistently come in at number five behind some of those other four. But man, they're still up there in the top echelon with this stuff because it's just great. It's a great sounding record, and even though yes, there's times where he sounds a little like Eddie Vedder or this is like another grunge band, I still think it sounds definitively like a Stone Temple Pilots record. It's their own sound. I think they've got great riffs on here. I forgot how good "Sex Type Thing" is. That chorus of that song and just everything about it is just really, really well put together. And it's the first three really: "Dead and Bloated," "Sex Type Thing," "Wicked Garden," really tip top songs. Ways to enter. With their debut album. We just talked about TLC kind of trying to find their footing. This is a fully formed band with this record. And they have obviously, and then they put like two of the biggest hits, towards the middle and end with Creep and Plush, which are kind of slower, maybe more introspective type songs. And just like, Cracker Man's a great penultimate song. It's just, I don't know, man. I think that Stone Temple Pilots. I am challenging myself, I guess, because like I said, that was kind of my narrative is that they're not as good. But I don't know, man. This is a great. I do remember liking this album growing up as well. But just listening to it this week for the first time in a long time, I pretty much loved every song on here. They do have a couple of those things where they have like like "Wet My Bed," which is kind of like I don't know if it's like a gag song or whatever. I don't know the story behind that, but it's kind of like Bugs when Pearl Jam did that on Vitalogy, or these like quasi throwaway songs, but again, if it only comes in at a minute and a half, and it's fine. It's not like a totally off-putting thing, but it's clearly not a fully formed song. It's just like sounds in the background. It's Weiland kind of talking about a bunch. I don't know what he's talking. He's talking about wet in his bed, or I don't. Where's my phone? I don't know. Like whatever he says, like okay, whatever. But it's still fine. But yeah, it's a great rock album. It's very indicative of this time and very solid. So thumbs up for me for sure.
It's interesting, Matt, because I don't have the same stigma with Stone Temple Pilots you do. I always process them as a pretty good band. I always thought they got unfairly maligned.
Yes.
But I'm not as high on this album as you are.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think they get a lot better as time goes on. There are highs. Like the two big singles, Creep and Plush, are both very good songs. Sex Type Thing is a really good aggressive song that I like. It's forebodingly... I know they're trying to go with a positive message in the song, but of course it kind of played as more ominous than it was.
Yeah, you got flack for that.
Yeah, but when you look at the lyrics, you could see that people misread it. And Wicked Garden is another really good song. I like that. I also don't mind the song Naked Sunday quite a bit. The rest, though, there's a little bit too much trying to sound like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains here. There's quite a few. So Dead and Bloated comes to mind, and Cracker Man, right? Piece of Pie definitely sounds like a Soundgarden redux. I do think some of the songs suffer a little bit from being the value brand version of some of the really top tier grunge that's going on. And, it's ironic that they get knocked for Plush being a lesser Pearl Jam song, because outside the lyrics, I don't think it sounds much like a Pearl Jam song to me. It's in the sense of it sounds like he's singing like Eddie Vedder, but then when you listen to the song without the lyric, it sounds like a Stone Temple Pilots song. And it sounds actually a little bit more... I always think they sound a little bit more like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden than others. Now, with that being said, this is on the high end of Alice in Chains sound alikes, right? There'd be a whole genre of bands that do Alice in Chains sound alikes way worse than Alice in Chains, but this definitely had a little bit of that feel. I thought this album was inconsistent. I thought songs like Where the River Goes and Sin would have benefited from a little bit less time. I just didn't think they were interesting enough musically to go as long as they did. Decidedly thumbs in the middle for me on this one. As much now, I'm familiar with their first four albums, very familiar with them. Not to spoiler alert it, but I've always felt this one is the weakest of their first four albums, and the reason is because of the lack of consistency. In some ways, listening to this, it was really interesting because I'm like, this is so similar to the TLC album in the sense that there's a lot of pieces I like, and the hits I know are really strong songs, and I know they get considerably better, and I know where they evolve to, and they take it up a notch on the next one. So I said it is kind of interesting that the narrative is so similar for two albums of different genres in this. And I know that their biggest selling album, much like TLC's, is the next album after this. Yeah. But I own this album, and did own it from the beginning. I do not carry the stigma of Stone Temple Pilots as less. I actually think they come a lot more from that blues, BLOOZE, origin a little bit. I've always felt there's a little bit of Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith in Stone Temple Pilots sound. You don't get that as much on this album because it sounds way more tied to grunge. You have to dig a lot harder to hear the DeLeo's guitar playing at times from this, and some of that's the mix that there's a lot of drum in the front of this album compared to future Stone Temple Pilots album. It is that it's especially a lot of cymbal is in the front of this, like that in the front, and then Scott Weiland's voice. And I don't think the drum parts are bad, and I like Scott Weiland's voice a lot, but to me the best part of Stone Temple Pilots is sometimes what the DeLeo brothers do on guitar. I really like their riffs. They have some really dirty riffs that when it really clicks with Scott Weiland's sort of menacing but inviting voice is when they do their best work. And on this album, I feel like Sex Type Thing and Creep are the two songs that best demonstrate that mixing of everything together in different forms too, one slower and
Yeah,
one
right.
faster,
Yeah.
which I like. So there's a lot to like about this album, but I definitely wasn't as high on it as you are. I would
Yeah.
say thumbs in the middle for me on that one, but
No, that's
certainly I know
interesting.
what's coming, and I know there's going to be, more to come from
I,
them.
I mean, I remember liking Purple the best of the three. I don't know. I don't know the fourth album.
Number four.
I tailed off after the Tiny Music
Yeah, the
album,
big hit
but
on that one is Sour Girl, I think would be the
yeah,
song
right.
you might
I
be
do
thinking.
remember that song, but I never got the record. But yeah, I always thought that Purple. My memory is that Purple's my favorite. But this, I always liked this record. And I don't know. I mean, those songs that you kind of mentioned, like Sin or like Piece of Pie or Cracker Man, I like all of those songs, and they're definitely a tier below, kind of some of the other ones that we mentioned. But I don't know. To me, there's not. I don't really find any filler here, and maybe I think Purple, they definitely their sound evolves in the next couple records. I certainly agree with that, and they kind of try different things. This is kind of more a little bit straightforward, but to me, I don't know. I just most of it, pretty much all of it, resonates with me. So, I think I'm a little bit higher on this than you.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I have no problems with that take.
Yeah,
I think it's one of the most interesting things of the podcast, Matt, has been I did not realize that Josh was not a native citizen of this era of grunge. Like it's
yeah,
like a fresh blank slate for him. So in many ways it goes back to like when you and I found out, holy shit, you don't know bands like Guns N' Roses and Van Halen. Well, by
yeah,
all means, we need to invite you into this world. And seeing him
yes,
come to it was like that. And I don't want to infantilize Josh, but I'm getting a fun feel for that. As a result, I think Josh may like this album even more than we do because it's just going to be another entree into that grunge
yeah,
sound,
right,
which he's really connecting with. So,
yeah,
this also, though, reminds me that notable by its absence so far is our first big entry by Alice in Chains, because
yeah,
we had Bad Motorfinger, right, has come in. We've had Nevermind, now we've had 10. We did have Facelift by Alice in Chains, but Facelift by Alice in Chains is, my take on that is a lot like what this Stone Temple Pilots album is. And I believe, and this may play into perfectly
yep.
into what we're gonna do,
Softball.
I believe we're doing Dirt next week, right?
You are correct, sir.
And you said
Yes.
you're not familiar with that one, right?
That is correct.
Oh, I'm so
I am.
interested to hear you
So
listen to that album.
Alice in Chains, of all the grunge bands, they're the one I never owned an Alice in Chains record. So I've never listened start to back to an Alice in Chains record, but I am fairly familiar with the singles because they were definitely played a lot on MTV and the radio station I listened to. So I know the singles, don't know the albums.
Gotcha. Okay.